think the last hanging occurred in the United Kingdoms as a form of the death penalty? Any guesses?
60s?
Good guess. 1964 was the last documented execution by hanging in the United Kingdom. Today I'm going to teach you about a historical event that led to inspire an artist by the name of Elvis Costello to write a song called Let 'Em Dangle. I'm going to start by introducing Derek Bentley, telling you about his background, and then I'm going to introduce you to his friend Chris Craig. Then I'm going to tell you about the events that led up to and happened after the murder of Police Constable Cindy Mills. After that, I will tell you about the legal proceedings that took place before Bentley's execution, and finally, the legal proceedings that took place after Derek Bentley's execution. Let's go ahead and start with a little bit of background. Derek Bentley was a 19-year-old war veteran, according to Richard Clark of capitalpunishuk.org. He suffered from epilepsy when he suffered an injury in the war, a head injury. He was also illiterate and alleged to have the mental capacity of an 11-year-old child. During the days up to the murder, he had previously been given a pair of knuckle dusters and a knife by his friend Chris Craig. As you can see here, this character right here, this is Derek Bentley. He's the person that we're going to focus on this speech. Right here is his friend Chris Craig. Chris Craig is the person that gave him the set of knuckle dusters and also the knife. Back in the day, this is what would be referred to as knuckle dusters. Today we refer to them as brass knuckles. Chris Craig was also armed. He had on him a knife very similar to the one that Bentley had, but he also was carrying a revolver. Now, Chris Craig normally carried a revolver, and Bentley would have known this. So, on the night of November 1952, the two of them decided to set out to go see if they could commit a burglary. They got thwarted and caught, but not captured or arrested in their first two attempts, and they decided to go after a warehouse by the name of Parker and Barlow. This right here is Barlow Street in the 1950s. The warehouse is this building down here at the very end, which is where they decided to go ahead and make their last burglary. As you can see, it's more of a residential street, so when they were going to burglarize this warehouse, a little girl saw them proceeding to enter the building, and her mother called the police officers. Two police officers were nearby, and Bentley and Craig heard them coming and decided to hide behind a lift housing on the flat roof of this warehouse building right here. Now, upon arrival, the police constables, including Detective Fairfax, came up and tried to apprehend both Craig and Bentley. Craig made it away, but Bentley did not. Bentley just stood by after he had been apprehended, leading to very curious about whether or not he was actually under arrest or not. But he didn't resist. Craig, however, decided to go off defiantly and tried to shoot his way out. In the process, he shot Police Constable Fairfax in the shoulder. Police Constable Fairfax is the one that's holding Bentley under arrest, allegedly. Now, as Craig was trying to shoot his way out, two other officers showed up. One of them was Police Detective Cindy Mills. He was the first up onto the roof following the shootings. And as Craig was still continuing to shoot his way out, he shot at anybody that entered the rooftop. This included Cindy Mills, who was shot once in the head and died immediately. Upon running out of all of his ammunition, then Chris Craig, still trying to elude arrest, jumped from this rooftop. And he landed very, very badly, 30 feet below onto a greenhouse, fracturing his spine and also breaking his wrist. This right here is the condition that Chris Craig was in when they arrested him. Obviously, very injured. And this right here is the police constable, Cindy Mills, who was shot. Going into the following days after, there was talk of whether or not they would charge both boys or just one. And as you heard in the song, Chris Craig, who was 16, was too young for the death penalty. So although they did try and convict Chris Craig, they also decided to try and convict Derek Bentley as well. Derek Bentley, who was 19, was able to be convicted and receive the death penalty. So, as the song sings, Chris Craig was too young to swing. So, the police came and took Bentley the very next day. Now, following the events that occurred, there were several different petitions, appeals, protests, and also jury recommendations following the procedures. As you can see, given the state of Chris Craig, he was tried and convicted, and given his state and condition and his age, he was detained at Her Majesty's pleasure. Now, this means that Her Majesty, gets to decide how long he would serve. In this case, he only served 10 years for the murder of Cindy Mills. And as you all now know, Derek Bentley was sentenced to death. The reasons why Chris Craig didn't receive death penalty besides his age was there was ambiguous evidence. They weren't entirely sure. They couldn't prove which gun actually had fired the shot that killed Cindy Mills. They were able to prove that it came from a revolver. But then the bullet they brought in to examine showed no trace of blood. So, one could say that even though Chris Craig didn't fire that bullet, or may not have, that he's still responsible because he caused the shootout to occur. Now, the three key points that led to the conviction of Derek Bentley were the famous phrase that he said in the song that I played for you earlier, "Let him have it, Chris." Here's the thing about that. There's not for sure context behind it, about what he meant by it, how he said it, what exactly it pertained to. However, there was still very damning evidence. The other two key points were that it is unsure whether he was arrested prior to the shooting of Cindy Mills. But the most damning piece of evidence was the fact that he was armed, meaning that he had planned to commit some illegal action. And this was enough to convict. Now, prior to his execution, there was a petition gathered together by the Common House of Parliament, which concluded 200 or so signatures from other people who didn't believe that Bentley should be hung. Tried, convicted, and sent to jail, of course, but spared the death penalty. However, during the 75 minutes that the jury took to convict, they also gave the Lord Chief Justice at the time, Lord Goddard, recommendation not to proceed with the death penalty. However, Lord Goddard did not relay this to the Home Office in his report of the trial. So, there are some that say that Lord Goddard was biased, and this bias may have come from the recent violence that had upsurged, causing 4 deaths of officers in the nearby area within the last year and a half. His appeal, Derek Bentley's appeal, was heard and dismissed on January 13th, 1951. The Common House Parliament is quoted to have said, "Advice tendered by Lord Goddard was a grievous mistake and out of accord to the nature of the justice in this case." Due to the dismissal of his appeal, Derek Bentley was hung on January 28th, 1951. Now here are the actions taken since. Several campaigns have occurred to try and get a posthumous pardon, which is when somebody is pardoned post-death. In 1991, the House Secretary, Kenneth Clark, rejected the Metropolitan's police report of the occurrence. Clark argued that there was reasonable doubt. However, he didn't argue it well enough, and it was dismissed. In 1998, the Court of Appeals finally overturned the conviction of Derek Bentley, and this was due in large part to the Lord Chief Justice at the time, Lord Bingham. Lord Bingham's damning attack on Lord Goddard's decision and thought process behind it were the main course. Lord Bingham concluded that Lord Goddard denied Bentley a fair trial that he was supposed to have been given being a United Kingdom citizen. He also concluded that Lord Goddard was prejudiced and that he misdirected and pressured the jury to come back with a conviction, which is possibly why the jury only took 75 minutes to come back with a conviction. Now, all of these things lead up to the main theme of this whole song, which is capital punishment. Now, capital punishment has been in our legal system for such a long time that it's hard to come up with a different alternative that might be more fair or that wouldn't involve killing another person. As the song sings, if murder is such a crime, then why do we use it to justify? I personally don't have a solution to capital punishment. I'm not gifted enough in that area to pretend that I have an intellectual idea on this topic. However, until then, there will be cases that capital punishment will be used as a result of somebody else's occurrences. As for today, Derek Bentley remains part of a very small percentage of people who have been granted a posthumous pardon.